This is an analysis from Alpha Business Media.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Welcome in, everyone. Today we are unpacking something that really fundamentally restructures how we understand regional geography and macroeconomic policy.
Yeah, and specifically the baseline costs of commercial logistics.
Exactly.
Okay.
So to start, I want you to picture the current state of the Prithvi Highway, specifically that grueling attempt to breach the Thongkat Pass into the Kathmandu Valley.
Oh, man, yeah.
Right. I mean, for anyone listening who manages a supply chain or analyzes regional trade, this is a glaring systemic bottleneck.
It really is.
You're out there looking at this seemingly endless queue of commercial cargo trucks. They're just idling extensively in these massive traffic jams triggered by localized landslides or sometimes, honestly, just sheer volume.
And you have these heavy commercial engines operating under extreme thermal stress, just trying to manage those steep gradients.
Yeah, it's brutal. And for decades, that serpentine, unpredictable crawl has functioned as this crippling metaphor for Nepal's broader economic architecture.
That's a great way to put it.
It's basically an invisible, inescapable tax levied on every single metric ton of cargo, whether you're moving industrial machinery, construction materials, or even temperature-sensitive pharmaceuticals into the capital.
And that invisible tax is precisely what has capped regional economic ambitions for so long.
Right.
The logistical drag we see on those mountain passes directly inflates the baseline operating costs for businesses. It dictates a highly inefficient allocation of capital across the board.
Because transit times are dictated by geological friction rather than actual scheduled logistics.
Exactly. And that systemic inefficiency acts as a heavy, heavy anchor on GDP growth.
Which makes the source material we're looking at today incredibly timely. We're diving into the Alpha Business Media strategic report titled Infrastructure 2026, How Tunnels/Logistics Cost by 18%.
It's a fantastic report.
It is. And our mission today for you, the listener, is to decode the mechanics behind Nepal's transition into this new tunnel age.
Because this is not just an engineering marvel.
No, not at all. We are looking at the detonation of a massive economic bottleneck. We're going to explore how boring straight through the Himalayas transforms the economy, permanently drops the cost floor for your groceries, and demands a radical shift in bureaucratic thinking.
Yeah, we are going to bypass the standard ribbon-cutting ceremonies today. We want to show you the tangible economic architecture of projects like the Nagdhunga and Siddhababa developments.
Put into the real mechanics of it.
Exactly, to prove why the true value multiplier here does not lie in just a single tunnel, but in the network. The capital stakes are enormous.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to dissect the core metric of this analysis, which is that 18% reduction in aggregate logistics costs.
The math of the mountain.
The math of the mountain, right. To understand that we have to contrast the old legacy environment with the new physical reality. Currently, commercial fleets navigate this 22-kilometer mountainous stretch.
Which is a 2-hour nightmare on a good day.
On a very good day, under optimal conditions. But then you introduce the new Nagdhunga tunnel integrated with its approach roads.
Right.
And that physical journey condenses to just 2.68 kilometers. You're replacing a high-friction 2-hour ascent with a flat linear trip of under 20 minutes.
The immediate operational savings there are just staggering.
Let's look at fuel first. When a standard 10-wheeler truck is forced to continuously shift gears and maintain high RPMs on those steep inclines, the fuel burn rate spikes aggressively.
It's a huge waste of energy.
The report calculates a 35% premium on fuel consumption per kilometer on the Legacy Pass compared to the flat tunnel route.
35%?
Yeah, 35. That single variable alone reduces per-trip fuel expenditures by 4 to 5%.
And then you have to factor in the reduction in thermal and mechanical degradation, which is equally critical.
The wear and tear.
Exactly. Commercial freight operations on rough mountainous terrain just destroy vehicle components. Brake linings undergo severe glazing during descents. Clutch plates risk burring out from the constant torque demands. And tire tread degrades at a highly accelerated rate.
So routing them through a standardized tunnel changes that entirely.
It does. The life cycle of these consumables is extended by an estimated 50 to 60%.
Wow, 60% longer life on parts.
Right. So when fleet managers recalculate their annual MRO, that's maintenance, repair, and operations budgets, that extension translates directly into another 3 to 4% in permanent structural savings.
So those direct operating expense reductions are compelling, but the report indicates that productivity gains unlock even more
Oh,
capital.
absolutely.
Take the standard Haituda to Kathmandu freight corridor. Because of the legacy Nagdhunga bottleneck, a round trip often expands into a full 24-hour operational cycle.
Which severely limits asset turnover.
Right. But with the tunnel bypassing, that a single commercial vehicle can scale from 2 trips to potentially 3 trips within that same operational window.
That is a massive 50% increase in baseline asset utilization.
50%. And that utilization metric completely alters the return on invested capital for fleet operators.
Because the exact same physical asset is now generating 50% higher revenue yield. Plus, it slashes driver fatigue, overtime liabilities, and the hidden cost of delay.
Which the report adds up to an additional 6 to 7% in labor and asset efficiency savings.
Yeah, so when you stack the 4 to 5% fuel savings, the 3 to 4% MRO reduction, and the 6 to 7% gain in asset utilization, that firmly establishes our 18% baseline cost reduction.
That's the floor.
That is the floor, but then the analysis introduces the real game changer, the aha moment.
Moving from a probabilistic model to a deterministic one.
Yes. The legacy mountain pass is inherently probabilistic. Fleet managers must account for a huge standard deviation in transit times due to weather closures, landslides, or just severe traffic cascading.
You never really know when the truck is going to arrive.
Exactly. But the tunnel infrastructure replaces that volatility with near absolute certainty.
And predictability is perhaps the most valuable yet hardest to quantify currency in commercial logistics.
It is the ultimate currency. For the first time, transporters can guarantee a narrow delivery window. And when you remove the risk premium previously baked into freight contracts, the aggregate enterprise-level savings actually approach the 25 to 30% threshold.
25 to 30%, that's a fundamental rewriting of regional freight economics.
Absolutely.
So what does this all mean for your wallet? Let's transition from abstract truck mechanics to something we all understand, the price of tomatoes at a calamari market stall.
Right, because all these logistics costs eventually hit the consumer.
Exactly. The Kathmandu Valley operates largely as an import-dependent economy. And because the legacy supply lines have always been subjected to those probabilistic disruptions, the entire commercial ecosystem has been forced to operate on a just-in-case inventory model.
Which is incredibly inefficient.
Right, from massive regional distributors down to localized retail storefronts, businesses basically hoard inventory to create a buffer against supply chain shocks.
And that buffer stock is essentially dead capital.
Dead capital.
Maintaining excess inventory restricts regional liquidity. It costs money to warehouse. It costs money to insure. And you're often servicing short-term, high-interest commercial debt to finance inventory that just sits there.
And for temperature-sensitive goods, you're absorbing massive depreciation as perishable assets degrade.
Exactly. Those holding costs do not simply vanish. They are systematically institutionalized into the pricing models and passed directly to you, the consumer, as an embedded inefficiency premium.
But tunnels flip this entirely to a just-in-time or JIT operational model.
This is the just-in-time revolution.
If a wholesale distributor knows with absolute certainty that a consolidated shipment from a Burgunge dry port or fresh vegetables from Daring will arrive within a guaranteed predictable 3-hour window, that expensive buffer stock vanishes.
They optimize their working capital cycles immediately.
And the deflationary impact of this on the consumer price index is highly measurable.
It is. The Alpha Business Media Report isolates the data on perishable agricultural imports. In the current framework, spoilage and thermal degradation during transit account for 15 to 20% of the final landed cost.
20% just lost to spoilage.
Yeah, but the tunnel's reliability secures the supply chain. By adhering to strict JIT delivery schedules, retail prices for these sensitive goods can contract by 5 to 8%.
5 to 8% cheaper groceries.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the macroeconomic punchline here is profound.
Let's talk about the Nepal Rastra Bank's CPI basket.
Right, it places a heavy weighting on food beverages and imported consumer goods. By de-risking the supply chain and lowering that inefficiency premium, a sustained 18 to 20% drop in logistics costs could shave between 0.75 and 1.25 percentage points off Kathmandu's annual headline inflation rate.
I really want to emphasize to you listening what a monumental achievement a 1-point inflation reduction is for everyday household purchasing power.
It is a massive economic stabilizer. It gives the central bank wider margins for monetary policy.
But the report notes that treating the Nagdhunga tunnel as an isolated win misses the plot entirely.
Oh, completely. You have to look at the network effect.
Right, moving beyond a single hole in the ground. They highlight the Siddhababa tunnel on the Butwa-Palpa section of the Siddhartha Highway.
Which is a brilliant example.
While it's obviously a life-saving bypass for a deadly landslide zone, its economic function is actually acting as a major arterial node.
Because networks scale exponentially, not linearly.
Exactly.
Connecting the Terai's industrial and agricultural heartland in Lumbini province directly with the major consumption and tourism hub of Pokhara in Gandaki province, that changes the entire investment calculus.
The report gives a great specific example here. It suddenly makes financial sense to build advanced processing plants for hill-grown coffee and oranges in Palpa.
Why? Because for the first time, producers have guaranteed all-weather rapid access to markets in the south.
The capital expenditure for those plants suddenly clears the required hurdle rates.
And we see a parallel impact on the service sector, too. Major hospitality and tourism operators in Pokhara can lower their operational cost because they now have a consistent, reliable supply chain.
It reminds me of the Swiss analogy the report draws, which I enthusiastically agree with.
It's a perfect comparison.
Right. The Swiss didn't just authorize the massive capital outlay for the Gotthard base tunnel merely to speed up a few trains. They built a dense, interconnected network to shift the entire transalpine freight model from road to rail,
Making Switzerland a central European logistics hub.
Exactly.
And that spatial economics model illustrates why future corridors here, like the Narayan Haitmugling route or the BP highway connecting Banapa, Sinduli, and Bardabas, they must be prioritized based on how they strengthen this national grid.
Not as standalone projects.
Right, evaluating them as standalone entities severely discounts their strategic value.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. The report outlines two distinct futures for Nepal's infrastructure.
The strategic crossroads,
Scenario 1 is what they call piecemeal progress,
which is essentially the path of least resistance.
the status quo.
Yeah. In this model, projects remain standalone triumphs. Each tunnel faces these grueling, decade-long sagas of fragmented negotiations, protracted land acquisition disputes, and political friction.
So the network effect never actually materializes.
Exactly. The economic velocity generated by one tunnel dissipates before it can connect to the next node. The benefits remain slow and localized.
But scenario 2 is the accelerated network. This is the ambitious alternative, and it requires a radical policy shift.
A severe departure from legacy governance.
The report advocates for creating an insulated, highly empowered National Tunnel and Infrastructure Authority.
With one sole job.
One job to fast-track a portfolio of 5 to 7 mission-critical tunnels over a condensed 15-year timeline.
Now, to finance a portfolio of that magnitude, you need modern mechanisms. We are talking about annuity hybrid public-private partnerships and long-term infrastructure bonds backed by project revenues.
Bringing in global pension funds and sovereign wealth entities.
Right. But then the report delivers this highly critical, hard truth.
Yeah, this part was fascinating.
The biggest mountain to move isn't the Himalayas, it is bureaucracy.
The delays on Nagdhunga were administrative, not geological.
Exactly. The engineers had the technological capacity to manage the rock. The project managers, however, were paralyzed by bureaucratic red tape.
The report makes a great distinction between the hardware and the software of infrastructure.
Yes, the physical boring machines, the concrete supply chains, that's the hardware. The global market can easily supply that.
But the software is the internal operating system of the state.
Right. Transparent procurement, swift land acquisition, stable environmental regulations. If the state fails to upgrade that bureaucratic software, the physical transformation is just buried under red tape.
And all those 18% cost reductions and disinflationary benefits we talked about are entirely consumed by holding costs and legal delays.
It forces a rigorous reevaluation of how capital projects are managed.
So just to do a quick energetic recap for you listening, the next time you hear about an infrastructure project, Don't just think about concrete and drills.
Look past the physical engineering.
Exactly. Think about 18% cost floors, plunging tomato prices, and the absolute death of just-in-case inventory hoarding.
It's about optimizing working capital and the exponential economic velocity of a cohesive national network.
Absolutely.
But as we wrap up this analysis, I want to leave you with a final lingering question, inspired by that hard truth section of the report.
Let's hear it.
We talked about the shift to a highly optimized, deterministic, just-in-time model. But consider this, if the software of infrastructure, the bureaucracy, the legal frameworks is truly the bottleneck, what happens to a nation's global competitiveness if it successfully masters the physical engineering of the 21st century, but fails to update its administrative operating system?
That's a great point.
Will these state-of-the-art physical highways inevitably find themselves choked by digital and bureaucratic toll booths? And furthermore, if you systematically strip away all that buffer stock for maximum efficiency, do you sacrifice the robust resilience required to survive an unprecedented systemic shock?
That structural tension between efficiency and resilience is such a critical dynamic to ponder. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We really hope this breakdown equipped you to keep questioning the world around you, continue to scrutinize the systemic bottlenecks in your own industries, and we will see you next time.